It started with the sound of hammers, sharp metallic echoes bouncing across the valley, carried by the crisp Montana wind. Daniel Carter knew that sound well. It was the sound of his bridge being tampered with. He set down his coffee mug on the porch railing and stared across the still blue water. The morning mist was just starting to lift, revealing the silver glint of steel and concrete, the bridge he'd built with his own hands 10 years ago. But this morning, there were strangers on it. 3 men in neon vests, driving stakes into the ground, bolting something heavy across the entry. Daniel's jaw tightened. He reached for his jacket and started down the narrow dirt path that led to the bridge. Every step felt heavier than the last, not from age but from disbelief. That bridge was his pride, his peace, and his escape from everything he'd left behind in the city. It connected the mainland to his secluded island cabin, a half-acre of quiet surrounded by glass-clear water and pine forest. And for the past decade, it had been his world. He built it when he walked away from his old life as a civil engineer. The stress, the deadlines, the skyscrapers that never felt like home, all of it behind him. That bridge had been the start of his freedom. And now someone was hammering chains into it. Oh! When Daniel reached the bridge entrance, the men barely looked up. One of them, tall, wearing an orange hard hat, nodded briefly. "Morning," Daniel said. "You mind telling me what you're doing on my bridge?" "Installing a gate," the worker replied without turning around. "Orders from the HOA." Daniel blinked. "HOA? There's no HOA here. Blue Ridge Homeowners Association," the man said, tightening a bolt. "They said this whole access road is community property now. They want restricted entry." Daniel's voice was calm, but his eyes hardened. "This road and that bridge are private. They're on my deed." The man shrugged. "Talk to them." "We're just following orders." Daniel exhaled slowly and looked down the road. That's when he saw the black SUV rolling up the gravel path, sunlight gleaming off its polished hood. He knew that car. Everyone in the valley did. It was Susan Bell's, the new president of the Blue Ridge HOA, perfectly dressed, always smiling like she owned the mountain itself. The SUV stopped right at the gate. The window rolled down, and there she was, platinum hair, pearl earrings, and a clipboard in her manicured hand. "Mr. Carter," she said in that syrupy tone people use when they're about to say something infuriating. "I was hoping we could have a little chat." Daniel folded his arms. "Seems you already started without me." Susan stepped out of the car, heels clicking on the asphalt. "This new gate is part of our updated security measures. Too many unregistered visitors crossing through HOA property. We're trying to protect everyone's investment." Daniel almost laughed. "Show of property? That bridge is mine." Susan smiled politely, the kind of smile that hides contempt. "Well, technically, Mr. Carter, this entire access road connects to our community area. That gives the HOA the right to manage it." "No," Daniel said flatly. "It doesn't." "Then you're welcome to bring your paperwork to the next HOA meeting," she said sweetly. "Until then, you'll need a gate pass to cross." She turned to walk back to her car, satisfied, as if the matter was settled. Daniel stood there, watching the workers drill the final bolts into his bridge. The new metal arm lowered with a heavy clang. Locked. Oh! That night, the lake was quiet, but Daniel couldn't sleep. The glow from the mainland reflected faintly across the water. The HOA's new streetlights casting their perfect yellow rings over what used to be pitch-black wilderness. He sat by his window, staring at the bridge. He could see the new gate from here, blocking his only way across. It wasn't about convenience. It was about control. Susan Bell and her HOA board had been expanding their reach for months. New bylaws, new fees, new rules about everything from fence height to mailbox color. Daniel had ignored it all. He wasn't part of their development. His land was older, separate, untouched by their paperwork. But people like Susan hated boundaries they couldn't cross. He still remembered the first time she came to his door, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning every inch of his cabin like it was a crime scene. "Mr. Carter," she'd said with that plastic grin, "you'll need to trim those pines near the lake edge. They block the community view." He'd smiled back. "The community can look somewhere else." She didn't like that. And now, months later, she'd found a way to make her point. "Oh!" By morning, Daniel decided to drive out to the county office, to anyone who'd listen. But when he reached the bridge, a guard was standing there. Not a cop, just a local security guy in an HOA jacket. "Morning," Daniel said carefully. "I need to cross." The guard looked at his clipboard. "Name: Daniel Carter." The man frowned, flipping through papers. "You're not on the list. I own the land past that bridge," Daniel said. "You better open it." "Sorry, sir. Until the HOA resolves the dispute, no unauthorized access." Daniel laughed once, short and cold. "So you're saying I'm unauthorized to go home?" The guard hesitated. "Just following orders, sir." Daniel turned slowly and looked back at the blue water shimmering beneath the bridge. He had to fight the urge to rip that chain right out of the post. But he didn't. Not yet. He knew better than to fight emotion with emotion. By noon, he was sitting in the county records office, flipping through old files. He found what he was looking for buried under 10 years of dust. A thin folder with his name, a date, and a survey map. He spread it across the desk. There it was, in black, ink and official stamps. His property line stretching from the cabin all the way to the mainland, covering the bridge and 50 feet of the access road beyond it. Daniel owned not just his cabin, but the land under that bridge. The HOA's claim was built on nothing. He closed the folder slowly and smiled, not out of relief, but anticipation. That evening, he stopped at the small diner by the county road, the kind of place where locals swapped gossip over coffee. The waitress, Carol, raised an eyebrow when she saw him. "Heard the HOA locked you out, Dan. That true?" "Looks that way," he said. "Bunch of vultures," she muttered. "They've been trying to take over everything. You gonna let 'em?" Daniel sipped his coffee, eyes distant. "Not for long." "Good," Carol said, nodding. "You built that bridge yourself, didn't you?" He smiled faintly. "Every bolt." "Then don't let them take it." He didn't plan to. Back at his cabin, Daniel spent hours going through documents. The bridge's blueprints, the invoices for the steel and concrete, the engineering permit signed by the county years before the HOA even existed. Each paper was a weapon now, and he planned to use them, but not yet. Timing was everything. He wanted them to feel comfortable, confident in their power. He wanted Susan Bell to believe she'd won. So for the next few days, Daniel stayed quiet. He didn't argue, didn't protest. He simply watched. He watched the HOA install new cameras by the bridge. He watched them issue parking tickets to people fishing near his shoreline. He even saw Susan giving tours to new buyers, bragging about the community's private lake access. That's when he realized they weren't just locking him out. They were using his bridge as a selling point. That was their biggest mistake. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the water turned gold, Daniel drove up to the gate again. Susan was there, clipboard in hand, flanked by 2 men in suits. "Mr. Carter," she said almost cheerfully. "Here for the meeting? I'm afraid only HOA members can attend." Daniel nodded slowly. "That's fine. I didn't come to join. I came to watch." Susan tilted her head. "Watch what?" He looked at the men beside her, prospective buyers, judging by their expressions. "You selling property on my bridge again?" Her smile faltered. "Excuse me?" Daniel's tone stayed calm. "That bridge sits entirely on my land, Mrs. Bell, every inch of it. You're collecting fees for something you don't own." Susan's eyes narrowed. "That's a serious accusation." "So's locking a man out of his home," Daniel said softly. For a moment, the wind was the only sound between them. Rustling leaves. The soft creak of the barrier arm swaying slightly. Then Susan smiled again, forced this time. "If you believe you have a case, Mr. Carter, take it to court. But until then, please stay off HOA property." She turned away, signaling the guard to close the gate. The barrier dropped with a loud click. Daniel didn't move. He just stared through the bars at his own bridge, his creation, now wearing someone else's chains. He whispered, "All right, Susan, you want to play ownership games? Let's see how you handle losing the board you're standing on." That night, thunder rolled across the valley. Rain hammered the roof of Daniel's cabin, lightning flashing over the lake. He sat at his desk, the map spread open in front of him. He traced his finger along the property line again, stopping at the bridge. That narrow strip of land, That 50-foot stretch connecting the HOA's entire neighborhood to the main highway belonged to him. Without his bridge, they were isolated, trapped, and they didn't even know it yet. He folded the map carefully, placed it back into its envelope, and leaned back in his chair. Tomorrow, he thought, they'll learn who really owns this valley. As the storm raged outside, Daniel Carter smiled, calm, patient, and ready. Because while the HOA had locked him out of his cabin, they'd just handed him the key to everything else. The storm passed overnight, leaving the valley washed clean. The lake gleamed like glass under the morning sun, and standing at the edge of that same water, Daniel Carter was already at work. He wasn't building this time. He was preparing. Stacks of papers, maps, and stamped county deeds lay spread out across the hood of his truck. Every line, every coordinate, every official seal told the same story. The bridge, the road leading to it, and the land beneath both were his. It was all right there in black and white. And now, it was time to show the HOA what that meant. By noon, Daniel had made 3 stops: the county clerk's office, the sheriff's department, and finally the local newspaper. At each one, he left behind a copy of his documents and a single statement, typed neatly at the bottom. Effective immediately. Access to private property owned by Daniel. Carter is restricted to authorized individuals only. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make threats. He just let the paperwork speak for itself. By Friday, word had spread. The HOA board called an urgent meeting. Their president, Susan Bell, was furious. Not that she'd been wrong, but that she'd been challenged. By the time Daniel arrived at the bridge that morning, the scene looked like something out of a courtroom. 3 HOA board members, 2 lawyers, and even a couple of county deputies stood near the locked gate. And right in the middle, wearing her signature cream suit and dark sunglasses, was Susan Bell. She saw Daniel's truck pull up and crossed her arms. "Well, if it isn't the bridge builder himself," she said. "Come to see what real property management looks like?" Daniel climbed out slowly, papers in hand. "Actually," he said calmly, "I came to show you what ownership looks like." The smirk on her face didn't last long. He handed the sheriff a folder first. The deputy flipped through the pages, frowning, his finger tracing the map lines. "This is your deed?" the deputy asked. Daniel nodded. "Filed and recorded in 2011. Everything from that ridgeline to the lakefront, including the bridge and the first section of this road." The deputy raised his eyebrows. "That covers—" "Quite a bit. It covers everything they're standing on," Daniel said quietly. Susan stepped forward, her voice sharp. "That's ridiculous. The HOA maintains this entire area." Daniel looked at her evenly. "Maintenance isn't ownership. Mrs. Bell, you can polish someone else's floor all you want. It doesn't make it yours." The sheriff closed the folder, handed it back, and said to Susan, "Ma'am, unless you can produce proof that this land belongs to the HOA, I'd advise you to remove that gate immediately." Susan's face turned red. "This is absurd." "He's just one man." Daniel smiled faintly. "One man with the right paperwork." The silence that followed was thick enough to feel. Even the wind seemed to stop. Finally, Susan snapped. "Fine. You want your bridge? Take it. But don't expect the HOA to maintain your access road anymore." Daniel took a slow step forward, his boots echoing on the asphalt. "You mean my access road?" She blinked. "Excuse me?" He held up another document, a county easement map, the one the HOA had used for years. "See this section here?" he said, pointing. "That's part of the same parcel. Every resident beyond this point uses my bridge and my land to reach their homes. Technically, they've been trespassing for years." One of the board members swallowed hard. "That can't be right." Daniel handed him the stamped version from the county. "It's right, and I could close it down today if I wanted." Susan's voice trembled, the first crack in her confidence. "You wouldn't dare." Daniel looked at her, calm, steady, unflinching. "I would, but I'll give you 48 hours to remove every HOA sign, camera, and barrier from my property. After that, I shut the bridge, permanently." The board scrambled. Phone calls flew, lawyers whispered. But the documents were airtight. The HOA had no authority, no claim, no legal footing left to stand on. By the next morning, the gate was gone. The workers returned to unbolt everything they'd installed, under Susan's silent, furious watch. Daniel stood nearby, coffee in hand, saying nothing. When the last bolt came loose, he stepped forward, pulled the chain away, and opened the bridge with a slow, deliberate motion. He didn't rush. He didn't gloat. He simply looked at Susan and said, "You should have checked the map before you tried to take mine." Then he turned and crossed the bridge, his boots echoing softly on the steel. For the first time in weeks, the sound was peaceful again. But Daniel wasn't done. Over the next week, he took quiet control of everything the HOA had used on his land. He installed motion cameras at both ends of the bridge. He built a small wooden gatehouse, not fancy but solid, with a sign that read, "Private property, no trespassing without permission." And he meant it. Any vehicle that crossed without his say-so was politely turned around. Even HOA security had to stop and ask now. It drove Susan Bell mad. She tried to fight back, filed complaints, sent letters, threatened lawsuits. But every time she tried, Daniel responded with copies of the same deed, the same survey, the same set of signatures older than her entire association. She couldn't fight what was legally his. And when the county assessor got involved, things got worse for her. Turns out because Daniel owned the only physical access road, every property beyond it was now considered landlocked. Without guaranteed access, property values inside the HOA dropped overnight. Buyers backed out. Residents started blaming Susan for everything. By the end of the month, half the community had turned against her. Then came the final blow. One morning, the HOA maintenance truck tried to cross the bridge without permission. Daniel stopped them halfway. The driver rolled down his window. "Mrs. Bell said we're allowed through." Daniel pointed to the sign beside him. "Not without my consent." The man hesitated. "We need to service the streetlights." "Not my problem," Daniel said. "Maybe your HOA should build its own bridge." And with that, he closed the barrier and walked away. The next day, the story hit the local paper. Engineer wins property dispute. HOA cut off from mainland after lockout fiasco. Within days, reporters were calling. The HOA's reputation was ruined. Homeowners began selling fast, desperate to escape the mess. And Susan Bell, the once proud president, resigned publicly, citing irreconcilable legal issues. Daniel never said a word about it. He didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. He just went back to his cabin, back to his quiet mornings by the lake. Sometimes the neighbors would see him standing at the edge of the bridge, hands in his pockets, watching the sun rise over the mountains. The bridge gleamed in the light, strong and silent, a reminder of what patience and principle could build, and what arrogance could destroy. Every few weeks, someone from town would ask, "Dan, why not just let them use it again? Make peace." He'd smile faintly and shake his head. Peace doesn't come from letting people walk over you. It comes from knowing where to draw the line and standing on the right side of it. Months passed. The HOA disbanded. The neighborhood became quiet again, a collection of empty houses, fading signs, and quiet roads leading nowhere. But Daniel's bridge stood firm. He'd cleaned it, repainted it, even restored the old lanterns he'd hung years ago. It wasn't just a path anymore. It was a statement. The same bridge they tried to lock him out with had become their downfall. One autumn evening, as the wind carried the scent of pine and rain across the lake, Daniel stood halfway across the bridge, the same spot where Susan once yelled, "This bridge is mine." Now it was silent, only the sound of water moving below. He looked out over the valley and smiled, just a little. Because justice doesn't always come in grand gestures or courtroom victories. Sometimes it's quiet and steady. The sound of boots crossing a bridge that belongs to you and no one else. Daniel Carter didn't just win. He reminded them that ownership isn't about control. It's about respect. And when they tried to take that away, he didn't shout. He didn't fight dirty. He just stood firm and let the bridge speak for itself. Because in the end, it wasn't revenge that satisfied him. It was peace. His bridge, his land, his silence, the calm after the storm.